to get the recording or to get the complete webinar, I can share that with other people or with you later. Okay, so I understand if you have to leave, just and don't need to ask for permission. Of course, I understand how people are getting busy. Luckily, so I'm glad to hear that. Um, so again, thank you. My name is Victoria Del Paso. Many of you know me. Some of you have worked with me. Some of you have taken courses with me. Some of you don't know me, and I hope to get to meet you one day. But it's nice to meet you here virtually and to see that you are interested in this topic, and if I can contribute something to your professional development, that is very rewarding to me. I am a full-time interpreter, mostly work in court, in federal court these days. I do have other clients and do some conference, and I do online teaching as well for court interpreters. So the reason why I decided to do this, my first career was teaching, and then I went into interpreting. So half my life I did teaching, half my life interpreting, and I'm combining both. I enjoy teaching a lot. But of course, interpreting pays better. So, and I like to move on always. So I am using what I have learned to try to share with people during this COVID emergency crisis. Most of us are, I'm sorry, apparently there's an interruption on the screen. I'm going to try to hide something from the back that's interrupting. Just give me a second. There's things that pop up, and you should be seeing the screen again. So I was saying I had the opportunity during this time of crisis and cancellations and postponements and things like that to use the time to attend webinars myself and to increase my knowledge on different topics. And this is one of them. And I felt very lucky to have come across some of the people that are offering this training, and some for free, some for very little. So I decided to pass it along because I thought, well, this is good for me, and I know it's going to be good for many of my colleagues so that are in a similar situation. And so that's why I'm doing this today. I normally do different sorts of webinars for training and for continuing education. This is sort of a new topic, not really new, but it's a topic that now has more interest and has called the attention of many people because, of course, in the situation we're now with all the cancellations, we are trying to see how we can replace the income that we had with freelancing. And our lives have been interrupted in that sense. Most of us are freelancers, and of course, with the cancellations, we don't get paid. However, there are ways that you can continue working. So far, not at the same rate, but I think this is increasingly becoming more popular, and as it is very useful, more people are getting on this boat. So I wanted to share that with you and see how we can actually make good use of these resources, of this technology, and continue to work in spite of the crisis. So it requires some adaptation, but we're going to do a little bit of um, reviewing of what types of interpreting, what modes of interpreting, and what can and cannot be done and how to do it. That's why I call it remote interpreting ways and means. So I have people here from mostly from the interpreting world, some or most practicing interpreters, and If something of what I say is basic, I don't mean to offend you. It's a very general audience that I have today, and I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing. So I do a little bit of recap about our job and the different ways in which we in which we interpret and use our skills. So I'm going to read the chat before this first slide in case I missed something. Somebody says I have difficulties hearing, and somebody says I can't see Victoria. Is that on purpose? Yes, Genevieve, I'm not on the screen. I like to share my screen with my presentation, with my PowerPoint. So you should see the PowerPoint and not my face. Occasionally, I set up the camera, but not for this, because I like to point at the screen. So you should be seeing the screen, and if somebody is not seeing the screen because you are connecting by audio, that's okay. The screen is a guide. It's a guide for me mostly. I'm going to be talking about all the points that are mentioned in the screen that are like a summary of what we're talking about. And then I can send you the recorded version where you can see the video later. Okay. So now that we talk about the audio, I hear background noise from somebody's microphone that is open, and I ask that you all close your microphones, please, because that creates feedback for everybody. I am, in a quiet environment, and one microphone is all we need at the moment. Somebody says it's always best to plug in headphones if you have not already. I am on my headphones, and most people can hear me well. Now, I can hear some interference from an open mic, so I'm going to try to mute everybody. I thought I had done that, but somebody must have unmuted himself. So please, if you hear me, if you unmuted yourself, please mute your microphone so that we can all hear without the feedback and interference. Okay, I still hear background. Who is on the microphone, please? I can't really do it with open microphones from participants. We are 100 people, and all it takes is one loud microphone. Okay, there's somebody that says waiting for name. I don't know who it is that has the microphone open. Please, I don't mean to be rude, but please, please, please mute yourself so that everybody can hear well. I will be doing all the talking for an hour, and then we'll open it up for questions via chat, preferably, or taking turns on the microphone, as long as the connections are good. So that is an option that I'll open up later. Okay. Well, there's one person I can't mute, so maybe this person is on the phone, so just try to control the noise, please, around you, if you don't mind. Okay, not to be rude again, it's just for the sake of everybody being able to hear the presentation. Okay, so going back to the screen, and please use the chat for questions, and I can't really solve technical issues while I'm doing this, but remember I'm recording it. If you have a problem with the connection on your end, don't worry, you will get the recorded version if you request, okay? So, what types of interpreter types we have, or interpreter settings? situations in which we work as interpreters. Well, community interpreter, many of us do it or have done it, is situations where you work in social work settings, medical settings, hospitals, etc., where you can do all sorts of interviews and one-on-one, usually consecutive interpretation. The other one, which is what I do most, is court interpreting, what I'm doing most of the time because I've done it all. Court interpreter interprets in court hearings of different types, trial, civil, criminal, traffic, etc., and as well as correlated situations like depositions, jail visits, trial preparation, witnesses interviews, sometimes social services evaluations too, and psychological evaluations that are done with the purpose of presenting this in court. So those require a court certified interpreter as well. So that's what I do most of the time. And then there's a conference interpreter that interprets international meetings, business meetings on different topics. Could go from science to law to marketing, etc. Just like people or political issues, so like the UN or State Department. So these are the three basic types of interpreters settings that we work in. And the modes of interpretation we use in these settings, depending on the setting, we would use all three: consecutive, simultaneous, or sight. Sometimes some people do only simultaneous, some people do only consecutive, some people, I don't know anybody that does only sight interpretation, but it's a combination of the two, and it's the one that's done the least, I suspect. But it's required also in order to be certified to work in court. So most of us would do consecutive and simultaneous and sight, because most of us, from what I see on the list, are working in court or want to work in court, and that's what we need to do in order to pass the certification exam. Some people, like the conference interpreters, do only simultaneous interpretation. It is an advantage for them too to be able to do consecutive, sometimes long consecutive, because in some of those meetings there are situations where they, instead of using the booth, they do round tables and they don't have the equipment and it turns into consecutive. So it should have both skills, but there are people that prefer one or the other and work in only one mode. For that, you may work only in one direction, and be very good into, say, English into Spanish. And I put here Spanish as an example and English as an example because that's my language combination. But you can substitute that for your language. Some people would say interpret source language into target language, or English into foreign language. Call it what you want. In conference settings, the denomination typically is language A, B, and C rather than English and foreign language, because of course English is foreign to some people too. So English is one more language. It's not the language and all the rest are foreign languages. But we're in the United States. Most people in my audience are in the United States and they are more used to this classification. Sometimes even in the forms, when they ask you what language you interpret, English is not one of them. It's assumed we would all have English in our combination. But that's not the same case in Europe and other places where the combinations vary a lot. So yes, English is one that's present in almost all the international meetings, but it's not only English into foreign language. And as a matter of fact, they require three languages for that. Two active, and C would be your third language that you may interpret from to one of your A or B languages. So I call it English into Spanish, Spanish into English, like I said, for the purposes of this demonstration, because that's what I do. You can substitute that. So what we do, consecutive interpretation in court, we need to be able to go in both directions. We need to do English into Spanish, Spanish into English, and in consecutive mode. That is, after the speaker pauses, we render the interpretation. Then there may be another question, and then we interpret that back to the person we're interpreting for, and then interpret the answer back into the other language. So this needs to be back and forth for court purposes. Simultaneous interpretation, if you work in conferences in a booth, you may be able to work in only one direction, and maybe English is not even required. In the United States, the expectation is that one of your languages is English, of course, and it's rare to have a separate booth for English, but that is the desirable thing, and there should be an English booth. In most conferences internationally, there's an English booth, a Spanish booth, and a Japanese booth, a Chinese booth, etc., where there's 2 interpreters per booth, if not 3. But the standard is 2, a team of 2 for per language, per booth. However, in some conferences in the United States, they don't have the English booth, and all the booths require that the interpreters in the booth interpret back and forth into English as well as from English, depending on the situation, and they take turns. Sight interpretation, we need to go back and forth again. This may be required also in court when they submit some evidence, some document, or some little note, or some text message, or something in writing that has not been translated. It's not desirable, but we need to be able to do it if requested, if required, because there are situations where there is a need to render that with certain immediacy, because maybe a situation of urgency that can't wait for a translation. So we need to be able to handle that. Now, those are the modes of interpretation. And now we talk about different settings, different situations, and different platforms. In order to do all this interpretation, continue doing this interpretation in a remote way rather than on site like we are used to doing it, most of us. The topic today is remote simultaneous interpretation, but it could be remote consecutive as well. The thing is, remote consecutive is not anything new really, but it hasn't been used so much. So I'm going to review the different situations and platforms that are available and have been available for some time, like OPI, OTP, that is interpreting over the phone or telephonically, VRI, which is another version of OPI, only with image. And this has been around for a while, mainly started because of the need of interpretation from ASL interpreters. So ASL interpreters need to be on a screen. Uh, Interpreters of spoken language don't need that. So basically, we can do the same work over the phone. Okay, I hear an open mic. If you can please close it or try to not interfere, please. So, VRI, video remote interpreting, has been in use for quite some time and has mostly been used by ASL interpreters, sign language interpreters. So, for the first one, you require a phone, and you can do almost everything by phone consecutively. For the second one, you need a computer, a tablet, or a smartphone. And for the third one, which is the newest one, RSI, remote simultaneous interpretation, you need more than a phone. You need a computer, and a good computer. You need a second monitor, an advanced platform, a platform that allows for this type of interpretation simultaneously, because just a common platform. I'm sorry, sir. I can hear somebody talking in the background, and I ask, please, if you can not unmute yourself, and you cannot be on silent, you may hang up and I will send you the recording, because there are 50 other people listening and I'm recording this. Thank you. So this requires a more advanced platform than the platforms we use for social remote communication.
Non voglio l'audio. Per chiudere l'audio. Si chiude l'audio. È chiusa.
Victoria, please tell A71 to mute himself.
I have been saying that. Please, sir, unmute yourself. Mute yourself.
I think you have the capability from GoToMeeting that can mute everyone.
I did, but then somebody unmuted. So I'm going to do it again. Okay, hopefully that worked. Thank you. And my apologies. Sometimes I think I have the control of this, and I muted everybody in the beginning and I explained, but sometimes it's new for some people. And again, I'm not being rude, and don't take offense, but okay. So going back to RSI, remote simultaneous interpretation, which is the main topic for today. So this is something that is built on the prior experience and technology of VRI. Mostly it's pretty similar, except that we need a more advanced platform for this, because in order to be able to do simultaneous interpretation remotely, the setting has to be similar to the setting in booths, where you are on different channels. So the different interpreters, different languages are on different channels. And even if it is only one other language, the interpreter cannot be on the same channel, say, as the court. Otherwise, the court reporter that's taking the record and all the participants in the court proceeding, that may be 5, 10, who knows, are going to be hearing both languages, the foreign language and the English, at the same time, at the same volume, and nobody is going to understand anything. So in order to do simultaneous, you have to recreate the conditions of the booth, like for conference booth. So it has to be done in a sort of a studio setting. So this can be done from home, and now there are platforms that allow for that. But you just have to be prepared in your home to have a quiet place, to have a good computer, to make sure you're on the correct platform, because if you are on a platform that doesn't allow for simultaneous and people are expecting you to do simultaneous, or you are trying to do simultaneous and you're sharing channels, it's going to be very frustrating for everybody. So just we need to be prepared, be equipped, and know how to handle the situation and what platforms to use and how to use them. So this is something that has been available, not for a long time. This is something more recent, and although it has been available, it hasn't been widely used because people prefer to do it in person rather than remotely if possible. However, if you think of it, the remote simultaneous interpretation is not very different than what you do in a conference setting when you have the booth at the end of the room or maybe on another floor. And that's exactly what remote is. I mean, my last conference, I was nowhere near the speakers. We were in the same hotel. Some people were at the restaurant, some people were in one room, some people were on a stage in another place where with a big audience, and there was an interview of the speaker, this guy from Under Armour was interviewing golfers and stuff, and I was on a completely different floor in a booth with a colleague and another one doing Korean and Chinese, and I don't remember what else. Or we were at a gym where they were doing presentations, but we were in a booth remote from the speakers. And so this is exactly the same thing you can do from home, really, if you have or can create sort of a studio setting. So, and have the platform that allows for that. So in that case, in the conference, you have technicians, you have the organizers that arrange with the company that provides the technicians and the equipment, the physical equipment that you need, and you just show up and do your job in the booth, and you have the controls that are, devices, a monitor, a handheld control, a microphone, and buttons that you can use to mute or unmute, and etc., or to switch languages. Well, the remote simultaneous works practically the same way, except that instead of having the physical control from a separate device, which you also can have as a peripheral for the computer, they also made that available so that you feel more like normal. But really, you can use the screen to control the settings. So you're going to touch one language or the other, what language you're going to be interpreting into, whether you want to hear from the floor or from another booth if you're doing relay, etc. All that is built in the platform. So that's not something I can do with this platform I'm using now, that's GoToMeeting. Believe me, I tried. And then after trying and getting frustrated, I thought there would be a way. And if I use two devices, if I use different headsets, and if I sign in from my laptop and something else, I would be able to transmit on one and put a mask on my face so that they couldn't hear me while I'm listening. Well, I tried all sorts of things and came to the conclusion that it didn't work, and I figured there must be something out there, and sure there is. The reason why it wasn't widely available or widely known is because people prefer to do on-site, just like a lot of people prefer to do regular mail rather than email. But we can't really stop the advancement of technology, and eventually we all become accustomed to it and we all start using it. So I think that this mode of interpretation, which is now almost the only way in which you can continue doing the same job you were doing, we are kind of forced to try to implement it now if you want to carry on some of the hearings that you can do on site. But I think once this crisis is over and we can go back on site, we still are going to continue using this for part of the work or in some situations. So I think it's worth exploring it and try to get on board and try to adapt and start using these technologies. So all this modes of interpretation I mentioned before, and all the situations I mentioned before, consecutive, simultaneous, and site, can all this be done remotely? And yes, it can all be done remotely because we now have the technology to do it. It requires some adaptation. but it's worth doing the adaptation. Why? Like I say, because the circumstances demand that in this case. Also because it may provide an improvement over what we are doing now. Technology tries to make things easier, better, more available. Maybe also because of a question of survival. I mean, now it's either you do that, you work, or you don't work. So we kind of need to adapt if we want to survive in this environment. Um, and does it mean that because we adopt this technology and start doing simultaneous remote interpretation, we are not going to go back to doing this on site or in person? No, doesn't mean that, but it means that we can adapt and still uh, continue using the old way, continue doing the on-site. So the adapting doesn't mean to discard the old that we know works. So the old proven ways, the on-site, will continue to be useful and survive. Just that, while we wait, this is probably the only way we can do it. Now then, I suspect it's going to happen just like with the email. It's going to be here to stay. And even people who did not like it in the beginning are going to start using it and liking it, or having to use it whether they like it or not, because um, it's going to be widely used, I think. So all this can be done remotely, but not all this can be done with just a phone, like I said. Consecutive can be done with a phone. All you need is a phone, a good phone, good connection, sometimes headsets. That helps a lot. For BRI, you need a little bit more. You need the screen, you need computers, you need a way to appear visually, as well as a headset and a good connection. For site interpretation, also can be done remotely. You can get the things emailed, they can send you a link, they can post documents, upload documents on the site. And I suggest that you use these capabilities of the site, even if you are not using it for site interpretation, or if you're using a hybrid. For example, in some hearings I had recently, attorneys had uploaded or sent me by email some of the documentation and arguments, sentencing memos, guilty pleas, things like that, statement of facts that they're going to be reading onto the record. And so I was doing it simultaneously, but I also have the document to refer to follow along, just like I requested when I'm on site, or I get closer to the person reading to go along and follow or read the names that maybe I don't catch just from hearing them. So it's very useful, and it is very helpful, even if you're not using it to do site per se. You are using it as a help in your simultaneous. It's very useful to have the documentation, and the platforms that have this function built in, where people can upload or email or link or chat to submit something. So we need to get familiar with that, and also educate our customers to use it. So first time I did a hearing from court, I had no documentation. Then a judge asked me, "Are you reading it? Do you have this, Mr. Paso?" "No, I don't." I say, "If attorney could email it, or somebody from the court," and then they just send it, and I look at it on my other screen. So that's why we need two screens, really, because you want one to receive and one to be able to use as reference to consult your dictionaries or to read the documents. And that way the work is much more fluid. You need, as I said, for RSI, your computer, a monitor, headset, sometimes some people in studios have this standalone microphone. That's not necessary, but you know, it it helps sometimes. Cloud storage. You want to have a good capacity to store email connection, a good internet connection to receive email and links, etc., and to have an uninterrupted hearing. That is very important. So some of the webinars I attended with people use different platforms for this that are specific for this use. And in a couple of them, they suggested how to set up a home studio. And so this is what I started to do. I'm almost ready. I still need one more connection. I'm getting a second internet line where I will have a direct connection to my computer via internet cable, Ethernet cable, rather than Wi-Fi. And this is a requirement from some providers of the platform for RSI for conferences. Um, I'm going to do this at the end of the month. In the beginning, I thought, well, really, I have very good connection. I don't need this, but it is a requirement. And I understand why it's a requirement, because now that I've been doing this quite a few times with the court and exploring, sometimes started with consecutive, then we moved on to simultaneous because we were better set up and equipped on the right platform. However, all the participants that are in the meeting, they're not familiar with this. So you always have somebody that doesn't have the right connection, the connection drops, then they have to dial up or they have to call back, or the internet signal goes up and down because there's a lot of usage, and they're on Wi-Fi where a lot of people are at home using the same bandwidth with different devices, and so all that affects the connection and the streaming. So if you're on an international conference and working with 100 people or a booth mate who's also remote, it's very important that you don't risk any of that. So that's why they require that. So it's a little bit more set up, a little bit more involved, but it's doable. And like I say, I'm able to do it without that cable connection because I have very good internet direct to my unit. I have the latest files and I don't have anybody else sharing that. But that's not the same situation for everybody. So that's why the requirement. And there are minimum speeds required also for the high video content. Okay, so you need a more advanced setting, but it's doable. Everybody can do it from home if you create the conditions. Now, what can you do? Well, for consecutive, these are the type of things we normally do in consecutive mode, can be done remotely as well. A witness on the stand, it's not very common that they will call you to interpret a witness on the stand virtually, but I've done many witnesses on the stand in cases of workers' compensation, and I've done that on the phone. They just want the witness testimony, and it goes on consecutive, and this has been going on for a while. This can be easily be done. Or a case of a situation where there's a trial where they did not request interpreter, and then there is one witness that speaks Spanish and they realize the day of trial, or the person or the attorney thought, oh, his English is good enough, but then the day of trial, the person comes to the stand and the court reporter or the participants can understand his English, and so the judge will call the staff interpreter. And or if there is a staff interpreter, if there's no staff interpreter, they may call out to the language line or whatever service they may have contracted with to interview this witness or to do the examination, direct or cross, whatever, on the stand. Hopefully not very long, and hopefully they'll get somebody qualified on the phone. That doesn't happen all the time. But what I'm suggesting is that we get on with the technology and offer our services as court certified interpreters remotely to be able to work in the same situations we did till very recently on site, so that not everything has to be postponed until the end of this pandemic. So if it's a short witness on the stand, we can do it. We can do it on the phone or on VRI or any of the platforms. A defendant as a witness too. Sometimes a defendant is asked just a few questions and most of the hearing is simultaneous, but then there's a qualification of the witness, etc., or the defendant as a witness, and then that can be done remote. The interrogation, depositions also, they are starting to conduct this remotely, and I receive few emails during this time of the COVID where they are really pushing it for the depositions to continue in a remote fashion. So this is, I don't think they've been doing it for so long, but definitely now it's the only way they can do it in many cases. And there's a company in particular that I receive emails, Veritex. Apparently they are doing it all over the country. Those emails are addressed to the court reporters to take the record remotely. I have not been requested to do a deposition remotely, but I'm mentioning this because we may as well offer our services for that as well. If the court reporter can appear remotely, so can the interpreter. So it may be worth to let your clients, if you do deposition, know that you are equipped and prepared to do this virtually as well. Because I know it's been done. I haven't done it myself because just didn't have the occasion to be contracted for a deposition during this period. I'd be very happy to do it. More examples of consecutive interpretation that can be done remotely. All of this, traffic, initial appearance, advice of rights, detention hearings, bail reviews, these have been going on before the crisis and will continue. Witness interviews, etc. What has not been done much remotely is preparation for trial, but I suggest we can offer that so that all these trials that have been postponed. I had two very long trials scheduled, one for April, one for June, and they are both postponed. Even the June one, which we thought was going to go on maybe or would wait. But the thing is that before these people go to trial in these very serious cases, there's a lot of preparation that needs to be done. And if the attorneys cannot meet with the defendant because of the situation, then they cannot be prepared for trial. But I think by offering our services for these two, we can alleviate that, and we can work remotely in the preparation with the attorneys, and then they will be ready to go to trial when the courts reopen, rather than extend a few more months. Initial meeting with the attorney, this happens all the time, and all sorts of urgent matters, like, for example, temporary restraining orders, victim statement, reports of abuse, threat, etc. Those are things that need to be heard in spite of the crisis immediately or the same day. And so these hearings are taking place in spite of the cancellations and closures. There's usually one judge on duty and one public defender and one, they're the essential people that are still working for these emergencies. And so the way to carry this out when there is a need for interpretation is also to use the service of the interpreter remotely. They are doing that with the staff personnel, the staff court interpreters, and many courts are equipped, but they are equipped to do it consecutively or via phone or VRI. However, in federal court, we just started to do it remotely and simultaneous. So more examples of consecutive remote. Well, I don't want to spend much time with this. You'll know hospitals, detention centers. Sometimes the hospital may just call to place a lunch order, or the nurse coming to check in, or to or a relative of a patient inquiring about something. So all situations with hospitals, they have been going on remotely via phone, and they can continue. Now, we're talking about we talk about different platforms that are needed to conduct these different modes of interpretation. Like I said, not all platforms are good for remote simultaneous interpretation. Now my list keeps growing. I did this last Friday, and during that question and answer session, I learned also from people who have experience with these platforms, that some platforms that I thought were not suitable for remote simultaneous are now suitable for it. So for example, Zoom, that I put first on the list as saying, well, this is only good for consecutive. Microsoft Teams, I use that for consecutive. GoToMeeting is what I'm using now. I can use it for consecutive. And this should be moved down from the list because, like I said, you see a link there. One of the interpreters attending last Friday told me I was wrong, that Zoom can be used for simultaneous interpretation. I just, at that time, I had not had the experience, and I had heard from people who work in the different platforms, specifically people who train in these platforms, that Zoom is no good for this. Well, apparently now it is. I don't know if it's as good as the other, but it is possible to do it now, and it's a newer feature, and it is a paid feature. So it's not the same Zoom that you use to conduct your meetings with family and stuff, the free platform. So it's a paid feature, and it's a feature that keeps developing. So between last Friday and this Friday, not only did I learn that it can be used, but I did use it. I used it with the courts. First time, it was a disaster, to be honest. Second time, it worked better. The third time, it worked wonderfully. So why? Because everybody needs to adapt. Everybody needs to know how this works. We need to get familiar with the platform. So what happens is Zoom is very popular, and people think they know how to use it. And I have used it myself, and I had a subscription, but not as an interpreter. And so the first time I tried to log on, my credentials as participant or as host keep opening my platform in the format that I had, and did not allow me to go to the interpreter mode. The person setting up and from the other side, the court, we could not really be on the same page as to the technical issues that should have been sorted out before. And then there were people signing in, and there was a lot of delay trying to start the meeting, and then there were people that didn't have headsets, the sound was awful, etc. But we took care of it. We started late, it worked with a lot of patience. The next day I got online with a person that sets these things up, and we figured out, troubleshooted a couple of issues. I deleted what I had on my computer, I set up again, and the second time everybody had headsets and everybody knew how to use it, and we were on the different channels, which the first time it was going in and out. So it can be done. It just needs here you have a link to an article. Just needs to be set up appropriately to be used for interpreters, so that the interpreter is on a different channel, and so that everybody has good connection. because it's very difficult when people are in the lockup, for example, and the Wi-Fi connection is not good, and they are using just the cell phone of one of the guards or the marshal that's setting it up, and the person cannot touch the phone, and or somebody changes the channel, so there are issues that need to be worked out. There is an adaptation, but it can be done, and my suggestion is explore it and try to get ready, and then you can say, well, when they call you, yes, I can work virtually, I can do it, I can manage this platform or this platform or this other platform. So a lot of people ask, what's the best platform? That's hard for me to say. I don't have enough experience to say which is the best, and I don't want to promote one over another, to be honest. I have no interest in that. I just talk from what I heard, and I experienced very little of this. Kudo is one that's very popular. However, this is more for international meetings. It's an expensive platform. It is very, very good. It's just the same as working in a booth, really. And that's the one that tells you how to set up your home studio. So you can look it up, and they do free demos, which I did, and I got my little certification so that I know how to use the platform, and I hope I will be called one day to interpret conference from my home. But it's something that you can now explore. The demos are free, like I said. There's another one called Blue Jeans. I didn't know about this, and I have no experience with this, but some of the participants in the other webinar suggested that, so it's something to look up. VoiceBoxer is also quite popular, and I do have some experience training with this. Like this is also one of those webinars that more than one webinar that I took, that are being offered demonstrations and training and practice online. So I did that, and I like both Kudo and VoiceBoxer. I can't say that I don't like Blue Jeans. I just don't have experience. This is something I have heard in my trainings. Interprefy, Interactio, and ZipDX are other platforms that are being used for RSI and are all specifically set up for that, so that you have on the screen the controls as in your booth. And the difference is that your booth mate, if you're doing it from home, is not going to be with you, next to you in the booth, but you can work with a teammate. You should work with a teammate in case of conferences, where you can pass the microphone to your teammate, and there's a function there where you can pass the microphone, request the microphone, etc. You can switch the languages that you are receiving. So you mostly are going to be hearing the floor and interpreting into your language, but there may be a situation where you need to do relay because the speaker is not speaking on the floor in a language that you understand, and so you want to hear an interpreter from another booth and do relay into the other language. So all that is built in these platforms. The ones at the bottom of the screen from Kudo down, those are specific for this mode of interpretation for conference settings, and it's well worth researching that. The ones on top are the ones that are more widely used for different uses. They are all very good for consecutive and VRI, and I have used all of this. And like I said, Zoom, you can put it now in between because I'm going to move it here. Because yes, Zoom now has the capability of allowing for remote simultaneous as well. So the way I did it with Zoom, these last hearings I did with the federal court, they have what's called Zoom Gov. So I don't have the Zoom Gov. I'm invited to that. That's why the first time, I was looking at a different screen really. So Zoom Gov, somebody in the office will set up and send invitations, and then I am set up on a different channel as the interpreter, and I have the control, and I need to use that control to toggle between Spanish and English in my case. So depending on what language I am interpreting into. So instead of having the setup like in a conference where you have the floor and the different channels for the different languages, this is only one extra channel for Spanish. And so everybody should be on the English channel, but the person you're interpreting for, most of the times a defendant. This is what we did recently for hearing. We did, in the beginning, it was just um, detention hearings, but now that they found out they can use it and they have set up guilty pleas and sentencing so that people that are in condition to be released don't have to wait months until the courts open. So people with very low criminal background, cases of illegal re-entry where the sentencing guidelines say 0 to 6 months, but now they had a hearing that was postponed and they have to wait maybe for 6, 8, or 10 months more than the maximum of the guidelines, just because the court cannot do this remotely. It would be very unfair. So it is something that is an option that's available, and now that's available, it is being used and should be used, because there's no reason why those people should have been still detained when they could have been released with a hearing. And so this is what happened the last 2 weeks. A few people have been released thanks to that, thanks to the fact that the court, the judges, the prosecutor, the defense attorneys agreed to do this virtually, and the defendant, of course, because they have to have the consent. But of course, because it's in their interest, they would consent. So the guilty plea and the sentencing was done the same day, which normally is not. Normally they would have to wait. And all this was done thanks to the remote interpretation technology. Like I said, the first time we did with Microsoft Teams, it works well for consecutive, but that was not. It is very long for things that normally are done simultaneous. So now we know that Zoom is adequate for that purpose. We have been doing it in Zoom, and now they're setting up more. So the first time it was 1 a week, the second time was 2. Now next week I have 3. So hopefully they'll set up more, and more people can make good use of that. People that don't need to be detained can be released. Interpreters can do the job, and then when the courts reopen, they can do the trials and the other big stuff, and there won't be that much of a pileup if they start using this. So I suspect it's going to be used more and more as the crisis continues. So again, I can't say what's the best, but I suggest to explore all of the platforms, because it's hard to say one's best, and then these things keep changing. Like I said, initially, Zoom was not adequate for that, and now it is. Now, other links or suggestions, I also received this last week information that the state courts that have been saying that they were going to use the VRI system, but I said, okay, in that case, I don't work anymore in state court. But when they say, well, we can do on-site, we can do virtual. And I say, okay, put me down for that. But, you know, they keep sending me emails and everything is on site. And the rest was canceled. But they want to implement that and to make better use of this, and things they keep postponing. Now it was supposed to be till the end of April. Now it's still June 5th in my state. So by using this technology, they can carry out some of the hearings like we're doing in federal court. So this is a link to the National Center for State Courts. And just go into that site /VRI. There's a number of resources there, and you can explore and also hopefully get listed to offer the services. There's a database, national database of state court interpreters now, that they are updating, and also they send this information, I think this past week. So last week I did not have this on my slides, and I added it because I received this information, and I am on that list now, and I think all of you who are certified should be there too. So I looked that up, and with that I've been talking for an hour, and I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to check if there are questions pending on the chat. We can do the questions via text on the chat box, the chat room, and I can read them out loud and answer, or you can request to open the mic in turns because we are too many, and pose the question out loud, and I will try to answer the questions. I also take suggestions. I learn from this as well, and that's something that I always welcome, and I always welcome feedback, good and bad, believe it or not. Of course, the good one you can share with the whole wide world on the internet, wherever. The bad one, I prefer if you send it to me via email. I still would like to receive it because that helps me improve. And if I can try to solve something, I definitely will try, or to improve, to make it better. So I do want to hear it as well. Just I ask, don't post it. Just send it to me if it's of the bad kind. Any suggestions are welcome, and if you have experience in the use of any of these platforms or something that you want to add uh, to contribute to the group, that's also very welcome. So I'm going to open it up for questions. I'm going to take a pause of 2 minutes while you write your questions. Step out for 2 minutes, maybe 3, and come back and read the questions and start answering. Okay? I just need a sip of water. Okay, I am back. Let me open my chat box. Ooh, there's 24 messages. I hope I don't miss anybody. Um, Let me go back and start from the beginning if I can. Okay, Victoria, would you mind repeating? Wait. Victoria, would you mind repeating what OPI and OTP stand for? Sure. OPI means over the phone interpreting. Over the phone is OTP. So it's the same thing. Some people call it OPI, some people call it OTP. They are, it's an acronym that some people use. And if you go to the National Center for State Courts, that's what they call it too, OPI. And some people just call it telephonic interpreting. Just it refers to the means that you use for the interpretation. Okay. Let me continue with the questions. My screen, sorry, my screen is a little slow here. Okay. As far as judiciary interpreter, how do I ask and who, for example, material, complaint, caption, dates, addresses, info regarding the case and the LEP ahead of time of the assignment, including the judge's name, defense attorney, judge's assistant? Okay, very good question. You know what? In that respect, I find that the remote simultaneous is even better than in person in that respect. And I tell you why. The first time I did it, I was requested to do it. Everybody was so nervous. How is it going to work? I don't know how we're going to do it. I don't know, So the prosecutor called me the day before. The defense attorney called me the day before. The court had scheduled and asked a million questions too. And they all wanted to give me information, which in person they never do. I have to request and beg. But, it's the same people that I work with all the time. And because they think this is so difficult and so strange and, God knows how it's going to work, they go the extra mile to provide you the materials. So the prosecutor, I mean, I spend a lot of time too. I mean, let me tell you, some people think, well, it's shorter. Well, it wasn't shorter. The hearing was longer because I had to figure out a lot of stuff. People who are not used to technology. And the day before, everybody was so nervous about how it was going to work that they all made calls, sent emails. I don't know. I spent, I think, 2 hours the day before emailing back and forth, and prosecutors saying, okay, here I have the, um, I don't remember, it was a complaint or what, well, I have this sent, but, I have the other one, but it's not signed by the judge, but I'll email you later when it's signed by the judge. I'm like, why do I need it signed by the judge? I just need but he wanted to provide me with everything. And normally I have a hard time getting the stuff. I have to ask, oh, I didn't think, let me go make a copy. Let me see if the courtroom clerk can make a copy. And usually, I just go over to their side and read over their shoulder. And I have no idea sometimes who's on the other side, what's the name of the agent, I mean, usually the court reporter asks that and I write it down before. But in this case, it worked out better for me. One, because I had material before then, because also you can ask and they can send it to you, just with a click of a button. You don't have to go running for a photocopy or interrupt anything. Usually because this is so new, people try to get organized and set up before. And also when you're on the screen, you see the names all written down and you have the document on your other screen and the names of the participants when they pop out. That you have sometimes the face, sometimes they don't have the camera, but they have the names all written down. So I had more names than I usually do, and all spelled out. So that was wonderful. and I knew who was talking, and I could see the name written down. So the last hearing were 12 people. Okay, okay, let me continue. Have you any preferred specific dual wireless iPad or PC compatible headset built-in mic? Okay. Well, I just bought a couple new ones. I usually work with headsets, and I have a bunch at home. I just bought a couple new ones that were suggested in one of those webinars. And the first choice was out of stock. I mean, there's a whole bunch. They're all good, and some of these webinars for conference, they say you need this specific, headset with the built-in mic, and don't use the iPad headset, the one that or the microphone, because it's not good. But so far, I mean, I see people on the hearing from the court that are not used to, they don't have the equipment like I do, and they are on the regular wired iPad or iPhone microphones, and it works very well. I receive the sound very well. The only problem is when the internet connection is not good. Hello, this is Anna from Mexico. Is there going to be another presentation at 11 a.m.? The link you sent me was for a meeting at 11. Is this a different one? Yeah, it was at 11 a.m. Maybe you're in a different time zone. I'm sorry, Anna. If you're in Mexico, there's a different time zone. It was 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US. So we have a difference in time. So no, this is it, but I can send you the recording. So we're at the end, we're at the questions. So we started an hour ago. Okay, another one. Is it possible to practice with these formats without actually having a real session? Yes, Eileen, I actually did a few, and it's very helpful. It's very, very interesting. So I suggest if you're in LinkedIn, that's how I came across these offerings. Kudo offers free demonstrations, and once you do the free demonstration and do your platform certification that consists of answering the questions about the platform use, how to use it, etc., it's not really difficult. Then they invite you to a practice session. And also there are some people that are trainers that that train for this specific, with whom I took webinars, and I highly recommend them. Seven Sisters is a company. Elena Langdon is the name that comes to mind, but there are others. It's a group of people. So that they have been posting quite a lot now, because everybody has more time to do these trainings, and they have done a lot for free. So I'm very thankful for that, and that's why I wanted to pass it along. So the ones I did practice with was Kudo and Voice Boxer, and I found that out via the LinkedIn um, social network. So if you're not in it, I recommend you get on that, because there's a lot of professional stuff that is published there. So I know a lot of people like Facebook. I like Facebook, but I use that more for social questions, and for professional platforms I like LinkedIn. And so that's where most people post. So ask me to invite you, invite me. And and you will see, if you are on my LinkedIn, you will see the posts, and you will see all the likes that I put there. You will find the same thing I find. Okay, thanks so much for trying to help us out. Could you please tell us more about blue jeans? No, I'm sorry, I can't tell you more about blue jeans because, as I told you, I learned that last Friday from one of the participants, and I did not have time to explore it. Fortunately, this week I had more work with the courts because they started to like this thing. So I added to the list at the suggestion of one of the participants that has used it, and I said something that is worth looking into. I trust that is good information, but I don't have any experience personally with that. Will you be providing a certificate of attendance? Yes, I said in the beginning, my email and my previous postings, I said no, that I wasn't doing that because I had not requested pre-approval. I didn't think it would be approved, and it's 100 participants each time. It's a lot of work, but now I heard that they are accepting this for CUs, these and other courses, as long as they're legit without pre-approval in some of the states where they require pre-approval. So I told other people who attended last time that I'm going to get into that this weekend and see how I can send it to the whole list, to the list of attendees. And you may have to fill in your name though, because I can't do 200 individually. But yes, expect that in the mail. Just give me the weekend to explore that a little bit. In the email, I mean, the email with which you sign, with which you register for this, okay? Where can I find more info on interpreting simultaneously using Zoom? I have been using it, but only for consecutive. Yeah, I think, I suggest go to their platform. I learned it by doing it, and I learned it the hard way by failing it the first time and then troubleshooting. Because as I said, I was confident I could handle it because I thought it would be, but first I didn't think it would work because I was convinced it wasn't going to work and that the court didn't know what they were talking about, which was very petulant of me, I admit. But that's what I was told. That's what I heard from people who work on the other platforms, that, this is trying to improvise with Zoom. But then I heard, yes, it was being used and it's a new feature and blah, blah, blah. And then the court heard the same, and then they set it up, and they set it up right the second time. And I was able to do some pre-session troubleshooting the day before with the courtroom employees who volunteer, and the courtroom administrator, courtroom deputy, who took the time to explore this with me. So the second time around, it worked very well because it was set up the right way. So I learned it by trial and error and by doing it. Like I learned most of the things. I learned more by failing than by reading the manuals. I find the way. But I suppose there must be some guidance in the Zoom platform. And again, the one that I used was ZoomGov. So it's something that is set up from the court, an app or a feature that they pay for. But basically they have to set it up. I did not do the setup. I got the invitation, sign up through the link, and you
I'm
just
sorry,
have to be familiarized. Yes,
I didn't hear when you said it was Zoom. What was what the court used?
Gov, G-O-V, govern, for government.
GOV. Oh, okay. Thank you.
So it's a setup. I don't have it set up with ZoomGov. I mean, I received the invitation. The reason it didn't work the first time is because I had the regular Zoom, and it was overriding the platform that the ZoomGov, because I had the credentials stored in my computer. So I deleted that and clicked on the ZoomGov and downloaded what they sent me. So now I have it set up with ZoomGov from what they send me. They send me the link and I download it. But if you go to zoom.com, I know there are videos, there are demos, and so it's just a question of getting to the setup for interpreters. I haven't done it myself. As I say, I learned it by doing it. But by the time I did that, I had already explored all the other platforms and had an idea what to expect. So my understanding is that you work with 2 screens when doing VRI. Do you have to pay yourself to install all that? Okay. Elizabeth, really, I have not. What they do for VRI mostly it has been used for sign language interpretation. When I do the simultaneous interpretation, I am not on the screen. It's an option to be on the screen or not. I don't think as a Spanish interpreter I need to be on the screen. They don't need to see me. They need to hear me. And I prefer if the people on the screen are the people who are actually talking that I am interpreting, so that, say, the detainee or whoever is listening to the Spanish can see it's the judge talking now, it's the prosecutor asking the question, it's the defense attorney asking the question, and they hear my voice, but they are looking at the person who is actually speaking and I am interpreting. So for that reason, I prefer not to be on the screen, to be honest. So I don't do the VRI. And I see the use for that for the sign language. I don't see the use for that for the spoken language interpreters. But if you would like to have your picture there, or you don't mind, you have to dress up though. I do dress. I mean, I've been in my gym clothes for 4 weeks, one more or less, and using the same tool that I wash and wear. When I have a hearing with the court, I did get my jacket. So from the waist up, I have the jacket in case when they initially get on, the camera is on and they can see me. Once I turn the camera off, it doesn't matter. Really, you don't have, I don't think you need the camera, but it's a question of personal preference. And if you prefer because you want to signal or something, that would be a good use. Maybe you want to request them to slow down or something with a gesture on the screen. That would be another use. However, an advantage that I see on the remote interpreting over the in person, talking about this, the slowing down, is people have been slowing down without me requesting it, because they think this is all so new and so difficult. Really, I'm doing the same job, but they are slowing down. And 2, I have a chat box as well. So if somebody's speaking too fast or I'm getting lost, I can quickly put on the chat like you are doing now, please slow down, please send me that document, please email me that, I did not receive it, or things like that. Of course, it's another task, it's another distraction, but it's a possibility that you don't have when you're in person. You're trying to get the attention and they are looking down because they are reading, and you may want to try and wave, but they're not looking at you. But when people are on the screen from home, they're looking at the screen. And so whether you signal with your hand or you put on the chat, please slow down, they respond. Yes?
Victoria, do you take another question? I'm
Sure,
sorry to interrupt.
Sure. No, go ahead. Yes.
Regarding, thank you. By the way, thank you for doing this. Was exactly to that. And regarding what you just said, would it be a possibility like they do on broadcast CNN speaker that is speaking in the platform, whether it's Zoom, Kudos, or whatever, is also this. I mean, the person that speaks is all. There is a software that can transform into writing, into text,
speech. Okay.
what is being said, so
Yeah,
that the
yeah.
interpreter can not miss anything. And what do you think about this
Okay.
idea?
Well, when I work in federal court in some trials, I have the direct feed from the court reporter. They put an iPad on my screen on my desk, or I get my iPad and they connect, so I can read along with the court reporter. That's the draft. The draft the court reporter is typing. So he or she is doing that simultaneously, the same way I am doing. But sometimes they get something easier because they have the names, or because they can they have more information, and also I don't have to write down, for example, um, long lists of names or figures. I can look at the screen. However, I find that is more distracting for me if I want to follow. It's like doing relay interpretation, basically. That person is typing as the judge or whoever is speaking, so it's doing simultaneous just like I am doing, but maybe faster, maybe slower. And I also have to listen, so it's an added task, just like when you have the paper in front of you. It may help to have it as reference, or if you get lost, or to look at what I use it for is to look at names and figures or things like that. It is a help. Now, when you're doing remote, you're not seeing the direct feed from the court reporter, and what you're asking would be a substitute for that. It would be speech recognition software is what you're talking about. But let me tell you, I do not recommend that. The software exists, and you can have it in your computer now, or you can download something, and there's some for free and some that's paid. I don't see the benefit of that. Some people swear by it. The software recognition needs to be trained. It doesn't get everything, it gets some nonsense, and it's going to distract you more than help you, because normally you can do
Yeah,
a
yeah,
draft with
it
that
does.
and then you have to edit. So to me, and
It does. It does. It does.
yeah,
It
I mean,
definitely does. But what about a software that slows? It's software that slows, like a sort of a slow motion speech, like when I mean, I only did one virtual court assignment, but when the judge speaks and starts to mention the statutes,
mm,
I didn't have any information.
uh,
That slows me down a lot. It intimidates me a lot. Instead, it sort of
yeah,
like either slowing down the pace
right.
of the speaker,
Well, yeah,
or
I understand what you mean, and that's exactly what I use the feed from the court reporter for, to read those statutes, that they just click on one key and get the whole thing because they had it stored. Uh, and if I have to write it down and then say it, then I'm too late. Um, so I use it for that, just like I read along with a document if they are reading. That's what happens is when they are reading and they read it almost like as if they were saying it by heart. Is the same number statute they mention 100 times for them, but for you is the first time, and you cannot commit it to memory while you keep hearing the rest. So for that, it is worth it to have it in writing, to have the document in front of you, from which they are reading. And so if you can get that in advance, in anticipation, that'd be great. As far as slowing the pace with the software, like some of the software like you use for transcription, uh, you can control the pace, I suppose, if you have an audio, and you put it through that. But again, that means you cannot do the simultaneous really. Say you slow down on your end the way the judge speaks, the way you hear it, but the judge is not going to stop and wait for you to finish. You know, you're going to be 3, 4, 5 sentences behind, and that's very difficult to do and very distracting. And I have seen people try to do that where somebody gave them the speech and they were reading the speech, um, and they're reading 3 sentences later. It's okay if you can do it, but to me, it's more distracting than try to follow the speaker if I'm trying to read at the same time. So, it's just a question of practice and ability. I would not recommend using a software to slow it down, even if you could. But I don't know that you can with the software that is now in use. I mean, you can do one thing or the other. Okay, so if you were to interpret from a recording, you could do it, yes. Okay, I'm going to read a couple more here. Not so much a question, but more of a venting of Will. This is all great, but there are jurisdictions living in the Stone Age that do not want to try these platforms. So true. Or want to stick to archaic methods and then complain about how consecutive slows everything down over the phone. There is a lack of judicial education in this area. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's still people that tell you you don't need the interpreting equipment, and then they say, oh, but it's so slow and consecutive. But you want to simultaneous, you need the equipment. And yeah, and I can't accept that they tell me I don't need it. It's a true tool of the trade. But the problem is that they really don't know what our job is about, and what we can do is educate ourselves and try to educate and offer the service. And once we know how to use the technology and we are willing to do it, offer it. And like I said, because there is a need nowadays, I think a lot more people are getting on board that would never have thought or would have rejected it before. And it is happening slowly, but it's happening. I wish they had gotten on board last year, and so now we would all be working. so so it is slow, but that's what I see as the silver lining of this, really. If you ask me, I think I thought about this and I did not explore it because I had a lot of work on site. So I did, uh, but now I see this as a silver lining because a lot more people are uh, getting informed and more willing to try it. And I'm talking about the users more than the interpreters. But, we can do a little bit of educating them and also try to facilitate.
Victoria, do you have a time for
Okay.
another question, please?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay, hi everyone.
I have so much time these days. Time is plentiful, unfortunately.
Okay, I would like to ask if regarding training new interpreters, or maybe if you're aware of workshops where the remote interpreter now can observe and share screen how remote interpretation is done on a simultaneous and consecutive mode, particularly for judiciary. Are you aware of any webinar or
yes,
instructional?
I actually did some practice as a participant like that, and somebody mentioned here, I mentioned this name before, mentioned Seven Sisters, and the name Elena Langdon is the name that comes to mind. I think is Langdon, but again, she's on LinkedIn, and So just click Seven Sisters, Elena. Elena is not Helen, Elena Langdon. That's one that I remember because I did take her workshops, and it's very good. And, you know, they did it in 2 sessions. What was it called? What did they call it? Something about your studio. Anyway, just they are offering it also for free, and they do it in 2 sessions. So the first is introductory. I'm sorry, there's a lot of feedback. If we can take turns with the microphone, please. Whew. Okay, so yes, we have to do it one at a time because you see what happens, the feedback of many microphones open. So yes, look up Seven Sisters, Elena Langdon, Stringcan, Kudo, and all of the platforms I mentioned. They all post on LinkedIn, and many of them are doing demos. And if you know, if you do it and you're interested and sort of qualified, they'll invite you to those demonstrations too, and they let you practice. So you can first do it as a participant and then sort of a mock interpretation practice using the platform, it is wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, you're very welcome. Okay, and even though rates is not commonly discussed, so true, we can't discuss rates, but one thing I can tell you and I want to tell you is that I don't see any reason to charge less. I don't know why people get this into their heads that if you're working remote, if you're working from home or from upstairs or downstairs in the conference setting, or from an office in the courthouse that is in another place, why should you charge less? I mean, it's not easier. You're providing your certification, your training, your experience, your skills the same way, whether you do it remotely or in person. And you are also need to be familiarized with different platforms, learn technology, and have the technology available, and good technology. And so, if anything, you should charge more, not less. I don't understand this idea that now we're going to work by the minute because we work remote. No, I just charge the same. I would not charge any less. There is no reason. I don't know why the question comes up, but it does come up. And I am happy to tell everybody that wants to hear me, please don't charge less, because there is no reason to charge less. And I tell you, it may be more comfortable being in your pajamas if you want, or dress halfway dressed up and halfway dressed down, but the work is the same or more. And sometimes you even spend more time because of the preparation, like I said, and because not everybody is set up, or you go on, you want to start on time, but people have problems with the microphone, they can't hear, the volume is not right, people have on the you have 12 people participating in this hearing, and they're all in different rooms, all in different houses, with different capabilities as far as technology. Some don't have the headset, some don't know how to use the computer, some don't have a computer that is capable of handling the situation. Some, the Wi-Fi gets interrupted, the phone is breaking up. So it's actually more difficult, if you ask me. it takes more patience, it takes more adaptation, and the other day I had a hearing that normally I would do in 1 hour and it lasted 3. I was exhausted, exhausted. It wasn't planned for 3 hours, but it ended up lasting 3 hours, and I was like, oh my gosh, my head was going to explode. Um, all the time, yes, from the compute from my home studio. But I couldn't stop and go to the bathroom. I couldn't go and get a cup of coffee just because I'm home. If I brought the glass, I had it with me. If I didn't or I finished, I couldn't go get it. So I couldn't get a break, and it was done all consecutive because they said it was going to be done simultaneous, but it was not set up for simultaneous. So that resulted in frustration from everybody. The judge was very thankful, and the defendant, because he got to be released. But as far as the work I did, it was. I mean, I get paid the same normally. Yes, I would have driven to the courthouse, and it
Excuse
would have
me,
used the same time driving, coming and going. But as far as the work, it was more work. So.
excuse me, I cannot find Helen. I looked up on LinkedIn. I cannot find Helen London.
It's
I cannot find her. Also,
Elena Langdon.
well, in the somebody in the message wrote the HELLE and
No. Yes, no, it's Elena. Let me see if I can chime in
yeah,
there.
because I hate to interrupt you, but on the send to, I only have two options: the presenter and the organizer. So I cannot ask this question to all.
That's why I say
On the
I
chat.
am reading the questions. That's why I'm reading the questions. Elena Langdon. Teresa wrote it down.
No, but I'm saying in platform like GoToMeeting.com, that's what I wanted to learn. Certain things are not apparent, such as if I want to send you right now a chat, I can. But if I want to send it to all, when I click, I only have two options, and it says organizer only, organizers only, or presenter, and then Victoria Pazzo.
Okay.
Sorry.
So you cannot send it to the group. No, I know some people. It's different for some people, but that's why I'm reading the questions. I'm reading them out loud because I know that you can't read everybody else's questions, and so I got a link, and I am going to paste that. It says youtube.com watch. What is that YouTube, Elizabeth, about? What is that link for? I will paste it on the presentation, but if you can expand a little bit. Is that one of the presentations by Elena? Okay, great, thank you. So I will put it here. Okay, and the name is Elena Landon. She's one of them. There's more. I can't remember all the names. And the company is called Seven Sisters. And I think they also have a sister company called SpringCan. They do conferencing. They organize as well. Okay, can you send me via email? Sure, I can send an email with that, and I can include this and other contacts. Yeah. Okay. Okay, I wish you would just let her talk and say what she has to say. I'm sorry, let who talk? I'm glad to let anybody talk. Just take turns. This is what this section is for. Oh, okay. Somebody says, I wish you had let her Victoria talk because of the interruptions. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know there's interruptions and the feedback and the delay when all microphones are open. That's why I say take turns. But you know, that's one option to ask questions. It just requires a little bit more patience. Okay. And then National Center for State Courts information so that I could be included in the remote interpreting list. Yes. Tell you what, I can send you the video, but I don't know if you would want to hear it all over again. I can put it on YouTube. I can send you the presentation. I can send you the links on email. I'll do all that so that you can get all the information. Is there a phone service to connect 10 or 20 people at the same time for consecutive interpretation? Is a question. Yes, I mean, all of these allow for that. Zoom allows it, GoToMeeting allows it. I just don't give the phone connection because I can't have 20 people on the phone. It's just very, even with 2 or 3, really if they are all on good settings, it's fine, but oftentimes that's not the case. So but yes, you can have 10 or 20 people, and the plans that you pay for, it depends on the number of participants that you want. So I have this GoToMeeting set up for I think 150. I offer 100 seats for this webinar and it's sold out. However, some people did not show up, which is completely fine. But you know, you pay a certain price for the subscription according to the number of participants you want to allow. So, but all of these systems now, Zoom, GoToMeeting, a team, they allow for many participants and just different prices for how many. And some for free. I don't know if it's up to 10 participants for free or something like that. So that's why a lot of people use it just to communicate with the family because they don't pay anything, and that's why it's very popular. But the same platform has a paid for that will allow you to use for more participants. Okay, and I see a lot of thank yous, and thank you very much. It's my pleasure. I'm happy that I was able to do this. Okay, I have other names here. Kathy Kaufman. Yes, I also heard her on some of the presentations. I don't know the others. But just, yeah, just look, you know, they are out there. People just look them up. Okay, thank you so much. And thank you for your interest. It's a pleasure for me to be able to do that and share what I learned. And I hope this will work for everybody. And I hope that the courts and all the other users of our services get on board with that, so we can all have more work and so that we can benefit from all these technologies that exist and people have been um, slow in trying to adapt or incorporate. But now, thanks to this pandemic, I think things are changing, and so that's what I see as a little bit of a silver lining. And I think it's a good time for us to train, to be able to do it more, to offer it more, and to be ready when they are ready. Okay. Yes, you will get a certificate of participation. I said I will email that to everybody. Thank you so much, and hope to see you another time at another webinar or working somewhere in our dear profession, on site or remote. Thank you. Have a blessed day.